The French and Indian War was a significant conflict between France and Britain over control of North America, particularly the resource-rich Ohio River Valley. It set the stage for major shifts in colonial power and laid the groundwork for the American Revolution. In the mid-18th century, French and British ambitions clashed in the Ohio River Valley. French Captain Pierre-Joseph Céloron de Blainville led an expedition in 1749 to defend French claims by burying lead plates and warning Indian nations not to trade with British merchants. Despite these efforts, Indian groups in the region, such as the Shawnee and Delaware, were suspicious of the French. In response, the French began building a series of forts along the waterways in the Ohio River Valley. Meanwhile, Virginia's Governor Dinwiddie, angered by French intrusions, sent young George Washington to demand their withdrawal in 1753, a demand the French rejected. In the spring of 1754, the British led a militia to build a fort at the forks of the Ohio, but French forces and their Indian allies seized it and renamed it Fort Duquesne. Later that year, George Washington and Tanegrisson, a Seneca Iroquois ally, ambushed French forces at Jumonville Glen. This brief battle marked the beginning of the war. The French retaliated by attacking Washington's hastily constructed Fort Necessity, forcing his surrender. In 1755, British General Edward Braddock attempted to capture Fort Duquesne, but suffered a devastating defeat to combined French and Indian forces. Among them were warriors from Great Lakes nations, including the Menominee, Ojibwe, Ho-Chunk, and Potawatomi, all serving under the command of a French fur trader from Green Bay named Charles de Langlade. As a result of Braddock's defeat, many Ohio River Valley Indians decided to side with the French. For the next few years, Fort Duquesne became the starting point for hundreds of French and Indian raids along the Pennsylvania and Virginia frontier. It was not until May 1756 that Britain officially declared war on France. Things were not going well for the British. Lord Loudon, the new commander of British forces in North America, did not understand the colonists. When he made requests of the colonies, their elected assemblies did not cooperate. Lord Loudon would threaten to use force against the colonies. Some colonists started to see Lord Loudon as being as much a threat to their freedom as the French and Indians. Meanwhile, the French continued to win. Major General Louis Joseph de Montcalm and Indian allies defeated the British at Fort Oswego and again at Fort William Henry in New York. But victory at Fort William Henry came at a cost. Montcalm had 1,800 Indians with him. They fought with the French without pay in the hope of victory. They expected to gain the reward by taking captives and plunder. Many Indians traveled hundreds of miles to participate in the battle. When the British surrendered Fort William Henry, Montcalm did not consult his Indian allies when he drew up the surrender terms. The surrender terms denied the warriors the plunder they'd fought for. The day after the surrender, the American Indians decided to take what they saw as their due, and on August 10th, captured or killed hundreds of British, most of them colonists. Although the surrender was a victory for the French, it was also a turning point. After the way the American Indians were treated by the French at Fort William Henry, many of them decided not to fight with the French again. The French were never able to ask for Indian assistance to the extent that they had before. Loss of their American Indian allies was one of the factors that contributed to turning the tide of the war against the French. In 1758, British policy changes under Britain's new Secretary of State, William Pitt, re-energized their efforts. He sent more troops, increased spending, recalled Lord Loudon, and rallied support in the colonies. British forces captured key French strongholds, including Louisbourg and Fort Frontenac. Fort Frontenac supplied the goods and ships for the entire Western French army and the important French trade with the American Indians. Lieutenant Colonel Bradstreet reported that the French told him their troops to the southward and western garrisons will suffer greatly, if not entirely starve, for want of the provisions and vessels we have destroyed. As a result, the French could no longer support Fort Duquesne, which they abandoned to the British. In the fall of 1758, an important conference took place in eastern Pennsylvania. Representatives from the Iroquois Confederacy, the Shawnee, and the Delaware met to make peace with the British. The British made several promises to the American Indians in return for not fighting with the French. The treaty they signed promised that the British would prevent settlement on all of the lands west of the Appalachian Mountains after the war. This was bad news for the French. In 1759, British victories continued. They captured Quebec after General Wolfe and his men scaled the city's cliffs under the cover of darkness. Both Generals Wolfe and Montcalm died in the battle. The French colonial government retreated to Montreal, which fell to British forces in 1760. The war officially ended in North America, though it expanded globally as the 7 Years' War. Britain emerged as the dominant colonial power, while France's influence in North America faded. The 1763 Treaty of Paris formally ended the war. France gave the British all of its land in North America east of the Mississippi River, but the war's high cost led to taxation policies that angered American colonists. Indian nations faced new challenges as British settlers moved westward. These tensions sowed the seeds of future conflicts, including the American Revolution.